Welcome to episode 306 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon. If you're new to the podcast, go ahead and click the subscribe button real quick. I'll go ahead and wait. Thank you. This week, we're digging deeper into the science of soil nutrition with Oklahoma State University's Dr. Steve Phillips. By the way, you'll be able to find out more information about what we talk about on this episode and past episodes on our totally redesigned website, reddirtagronomy.com. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
My understanding, the gain is not the only output of the animal you're wanting to measure in that one. Is that correct?
Dr. Brian Arnell. And next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
Well, I mean, we worked, or we talked a lot. We didn't really work.
Dr. Josh Lofton. Before we get to the interviews, let's get a quick update on the crops with Dr. Brian Arnell. Now, this was recorded just a little bit ago, April 25th, 2024. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
So if we look at the wheat crop, we're at the tail end. Everything's wrapping up.
Yep.
We're across the state. I've heard notes of, and this is recording in kind of mid-late April right now. I've heard reports of wheat at soft dough as close to here as Perkins.
Really?
But we've still got some stuff. We've got some stuff up in Miami that's just starting to head out to already going through anthesis. So we're well along. There's not much we can do now. Still a little bit of opportunity on some of the later sown stuff for a fungicide. We have had a lot of reports about stripe rust in pockets, and so there's been a fair amount of fungicide where you have humidity and you have moisture. Across the board, the wheat's been a bit of a mixed bag. We have some of the statewide is probably one of the best years we've had in many, just a full bore of the state. We've got our northwest pocket. Unfortunately, those folks are going to be year 3 of a disaster. They're going to have 3 solid crops, that Alva region, that pocket around there. They're probably going to have 3 years without a grain crop, which hasn't happened in a long time. As you move back, as you move out of that hot zone there, you start moving. So if we get up to Red Rock, to Billings, man, they've taken a beating. In February, we were looking at 80, 90 bushel wheat pretty easy. So we're backing that down to 40 and 50 bushel. So it's there. There's something positive. Up in the northeast, looking through the standing wheat up there, it looks overall really good, really high yield potential. Some soft wheats on the Rendell farm last week, just really good yield potential. Moving down central and moving out west, I was also all the way out to Sentinel previously. And as you move west, it gets to be kind of a striking pattern where we really get to see those rainfall events that were just sliding bands, right? And so you'll have a band that looks just gorgeous. And, not far from Sentinel, I was in a wheat field that I would probably estimate should top 75 bushel as dry land.
Wow.
3 miles to the east, 4 miles to the east. That good field, the soil was soft. We were putting on a late application of zinc, had great soil moisture. Just a couple miles to the east, where we have an in-rate study, man, the ground was cracked. We're probably looking at a 35, 45 bushel yield potential. And so it's just, and this is a report I'm getting from that Fort Cobb hydro, everything along there. They had those sliding bands.
Right.
And so where it received the moisture, they've got some great yield potential. I've seen some really pretty wheat, some beautiful flag leaves, really pulling in, and has great potential to make it. If we get this rain that we're recording before we're supposed to get, we'll know by the time this is released. If that is a statewide event, it's going to help finish out a significant amount of the wheat and really move us to a good completion.
I really haven't checked the USDA numbers on this crop, or the crop conditions or any of that. Are we seeing? I would hope that Kansas is having a better year than they did last year. Are we seeing that up north?
Kansas is having a better year. There's still western Kansas is much like northwest Oklahoma. It's still dry. The good amount of folks that are suffering. The central Kansas isn't so bad, so it's better. But we still have those really rough pockets.
Right. Whenever you do have those multi-year drought events in hopefully a wheat crop, it doesn't come up. What is there anything that a producer should be thinking about as far as maintaining the soil that they do have as far as like the quality of the soil?
So it really gets to cover. And what are you going to do? So if I've got a failed wheat crop, I look at, okay, one, you've got to get, if you have insurance, you've got to get the insurance agent out to have it taken care of. Now, are you going to graze it? Some people just put out cattle and grazed what it was. Some went ahead and hayed. So a fair amount of hay was going down a week or two ago, even within that region. If you hay and you can catch a moisture event or two, now you're trying to get something on. Maybe it's a sorghum. Maybe it's a millet, something, even a hay grazer if you're focused on forage production. But the goal would be to get something growing on that ground if you can catch a moisture, because we have had these summer rain events. So we miss out on our wheat crop, but at least we get a little bit of rain to get something up and get some ground cover and moving forward, and hopefully take that to either a grain or forage option.
I'm seeing that just down the road from our farm. We have a producer. Well, actually, the producer across the road from me, his wheat looks great. You go a mile north, he's already hayed his, and then the guy down the road to the east of us, he still has cattle on it, and I mean he's just going to drive it to nubs on that. So it's been a better crop overall from, my traveling around and looking at the crop. I'm not actually in the field, but it looks, overall, one of the better crops in the past few years, which
absolutely
is saying something, but it's not.
No. Yeah. Well, I mean, in February, statewide, it was looking to be the absolute. So there's a lot of folks that put out fertilizer in February and just recently got it rained in, in the late March.
Yeah. Josh, whenever somebody does that and they want to go in with a double crop, and kind of what Brian was saying, after a failed wheat crop, is there anything in particular that they need to be thinking about?
Lots of rain.
Well, aside from the rain.
I mean, realistically, if you have decent residue, most of our double crops need decent residue.
Yeah.
And so, soybean in particular, but sorghum itself, corn, in some of those areas where we failed, we're going to need inches and inches and inches of rain to be suitable to go into a summer crop.
Over amount of time, not all at once.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like between now and mid-June to July, we're going to need maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain before I would even be comfortable putting in a seed into a ground, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
Because we kind of talked about this, is that there's some places that the wheat looks really good, and that's solely because their surface soil is wet.
Right.
They don't actually have subsoil moisture.
Yeah.
So if it stops raining, the minute it stops raining, things are going to go backwards. And it might not be to this wheat, because we might be far enough along that we're going to make this wheat crop.
Yeah.
But if they go in for a double crop and we get really dry in the back half of July or June into July, you're going to see that subsoil moisture is pretty empty. There's some places that have, moisture to profile.
Yeah.
But the big issue with those folks up in the Northwest is not only are we going to need to fill that surface, but that subsurface is going to need some moisture before I'd be really that comfortable throwing more money in the ground,
right?
To put something out there. So it's tough, because they have to work with the bankers, they have to work with the landlords, they have to work with everybody else. So you might see some more disaster, depending on how the summer goes, some more disaster crops up there, because they have to do something. But it's gonna. If I would be comfortable uninsured to try to get a grain crop at the end of the year, or a complete forage,
right.
I'm going to need a lot of rain between now and mid-June.
So it's funny you say that, because I want to switch gears to some of the research that you're doing into forage stabilization in some of these pastures. Kind of talk about what it is, and if you've seen any progress in those pastures since.
So we're looking at, and this is more on the range and native side, or what you would say, the old improved that's now considered native, is that the last couple of years, with our drought, we've really pushed our range and our native ground a little bit too hard in many places. The lack of forage opportunity. So in a perfect world, you get one cutting off of that range native and you let it rest. You let it regrow in the fall, rest, and then come back in. Yeah. And we've pushed those really hard, and we've not been managing them nutrient-wise. And that one, OSU has historically said, don't fertilize range, don't fertilize your natives, you don't get a return. a lot of that work was really focused on the nitrogen aspect of it and looking a little bit into P&K. And so the work we're doing now is investigating this range, because the soil test values we're getting now, if phosphorus I want to be about 32.5 ppm, potassium I want about 125 ppm. I'm getting range values on phosphorus of 1 and 2 and of potassium of 10 and 15.
Wow.
That is really low. And so we have basically been mining the soil. We've probably pushed production on these harder.
Right.
And now we get into drought. And P&K is critical to, one, survive a drought, to have better winter survivability of these established grasses, and then in the spring to get the energy up and moving to outcompete the weed species. And so we don't have any good data now, because it's expected to be multiple years to understand. But looking at adding P&K fertility into some of our native range, native pastures, and seeing if we can't help revitalize some of those older stands that may have been mistreated. But as much as P&K, we also have to consider stocking and hay management, that we have to let that crop have a fall recovery period. Yeah. Which with the droughts is really, people get limited, and they got to get what they have to get.
This is a great segue to our guest, because this, I guess,
it's almost like you planned it.
I did.
Yeah, nice.
But I like to sound like I did. Yeah. So, as far as you know, yes, it did work out that way. Go ahead and introduce your guest.
All right. So our guest for this podcast is Dr. Steve Phillips. Dr. Phillips came in July. Was that right? Or August? August of this last year. He's come in as a research teaching role in soil fertility, but he's he's well known within at least Oklahoma State system. Alumni. I've had the opportunity since the time I was a little graduate baby to work with Dr. Phillips in all of his ventures. He graduated Oklahoma State University under Bill Ron. He was one of his technicians. Went to Virginia Tech and worked out on the Eastern Shore as an extension specialist in fertility. Got to work in tomatoes and cereals and a lot of different stuff out there. Who also advised another one of our former co-stars and members, Dr. Jason Warren. And so after that, and I'm just giving your quick bio there, Steve, he went to IPNI, International Plant Nutrition Institute. Worked in that many years, and that institute was the extension arm of basically industry, helping drive research and education from the fertilizer industry. Some mix-up, I guess you could say, or some changes in what IPNI was, which it was no longer. Dr. Phillips and Steve took the opportunity to go to Morocco and work for APNI, African Plant Nutrition Institute. And luckily, he's considered me a friend, so he brought me to Morocco often.
Oh, cool.
And so I've had a lot of opportunity to go and work and understand agriculture in Morocco, and we recently brought him back. Hopefully his final career location.
Well, I haven't got much career left. You kind of
a lot
showing
more there,
my
right?
age for me, yeah.
Oh. So, Steve, tell a little bit. I gave your background, but talk about some of your research interests, because I think really excited about the direction that you're kind of driving. You've got a really great holistic view of your direction of what you want to do with fertility work in Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Brian, I've had my finger still on the pulse of Oklahoma fertility issues my entire career, just because of my start here and my connections. And so, Dave, I'll tell you this, I've actually followed Brian and Josh's careers very closely. And so I've always had ideas of things that we might work on in Oklahoma. And in fact, I even funded some of Brian's work when I was at IPNI.
Not well. Let's get that straight.
Well, this is true. It's a supplemental, a little supplemental funding came his way on Oklahoma 08, where we started to really think about what we truly know about site-specific nutrient management and what we don't know, and some of the assumptions that we've made over the years regarding spatial variability in fertility, plant nutrient availability, yield potential, the response of these crops to fertilizer inputs, all at a spatial scale, and realized that there are several layers of drivers that hadn't been thoroughly vetted in terms of how we make a site-specific fertilizer recommendation. And so now that I'm back here, my program is actually looking at moving into some of these areas that I've watched develop over the past 2 decades.
Right.
Watching Brian and a lot of the things that Josh has done with the double cropping systems, just a general observation of areas where maybe the previous fertility research programs, being very heavily focused on certain areas,
Right.
maybe they were over there, and forage and pasture production is one that I think we've probably not given justice to,
Right.
in terms of understanding fertility management in those systems. And when you think about Oklahoma, it's wheat and cattle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so we haven't really done anything from the agronomy side that adds tremendous value to the beef production industry here in Oklahoma, which is a tremendous opportunity for us to do things to help us understand soil fertility and fertilizer recommendations, but also add value to the ranchers as well as the farmers here in the state.
What kind of feedback are you finding from the ranching industry? Is there a sense of excitement, or we've been doing it this way, we get hay every year?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the point where we've pitched any of these concepts
Right.
to, for example, the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association or the Cattlemen's Foundation, but just talking to largely area extension specialists, forage specialists, livestock specialists, there's a lot of interest there.
Oh, yeah.
There's support for what we're proposing to
Yes.
do. At this point, it's concept development stage, really, and then we'll move into some proof of concept with some of these projects that we're looking at. One of the things that we're really excited to do, one of the things that I've been trying to get people to do for years, is look at the animal as the performance indicator for our forage management
Right.
strategies. So we'll go in with a series of fertility and system treatments, and then we'll put stockers out there, and we'll actually measure the gain in the animals as a performance metric for our fertility treatments.
My understanding, the gain is not the only output of the animal you're wanting to measure in that one. Is that correct?
Well, you got to fund this stuff, Brian. And so we look at this as a one health ecosystem nutrient cycling thing.
Right.
So yes, we're going to look at the nitrogen running from the soil into the plant, into the animal, and out of the animal. And so we had discussed various ways to measure this. Reading through the literature, there are these diaper-like apparatuses that we put on the animal, but we thought, no, let's just go out and find a good steamy fresh pile and pick it up and run it through the lab. So every time we go out to check the weights, we're also going to scoop a little poop.
As you should.
Have you not shared with your grads that urine also contains a significant amount of urea, that they probably need to be bottling some of that on the go?
Yeah. Well, that's funny. We talk about when we bring them into the lot. We've got this one hourly employee that, fancies himself a cowboy. He's from Mustang, so I don't know how much of a cowboy he is, but he's going to be down there and we're like, oh, yeah, soon as you twist the tail, stuff will come out. So, when we push him into the chute, you be down there ready to catch the sample.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, the grad student that's been assigned to this, this sounds great to him. Get the hourlies out there collecting his data for him. Yeah.
It's one of those things. I really want that PhD, but how bad do I want that PhD?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's really interesting as far as changing the perspective of the performance animal, because that's really that's the end goal for many of the producers.
Yeah. We typically we cut the forage and we can determine what's the forage production, but how does that actually translate into a usable feed?
Right.
A value adding treatment. So we make more grass, but if the grass is of lower quality or palatability, whatever the case may be, we're doing it to grow beef. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to grow grass. We're putting out fertilizer to grow beef. Grass is the middleman.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we're looking at some of these concepts.
Yeah, and another project that I'm really excited about is one you've got Josh here tied in pretty well on. It's a long-term rotation study. Can you kind of dive into what you're doing out at LCB?
Yeah. This is quite an undertaking here. We've got probably 10 dissertations tied into one treatment structure.
Boy.
It's just, And, a lot of this goes back to a lot of the stuff that Brian and I have been working on for a long time, Dave, is that we've understood that, okay, we've made some assumptions in precision ag that we recognize a spatial distribution in nutrient availability. And so we've made variable rate applications, particularly of P and K and lime, but we've made the assumption that the calibration curve is the same. Mm-hmm. And so, we make the fertilizer recommendation based on a varying amount, let's say, of potassium, for example, spatially in the field, but we use the same calibration curve. So we're assuming that responsiveness to a fertilizer is uniform.
Right.
And it's not. I don't think it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think that there are factors, there are drivers, whether they be biological, physical, chemical. There's something happening in these areas of the field that have resulted in variation in soil test nutrients. Why do we assume that those same factors that affect the amount of nutrients, which is probably related to variations in yield potential, how are they not affecting the responsiveness to the fertilizer as well?
Right.
In fact, we mentioned Jason Warren earlier. He had a PhD student just finish a project where she's got some preliminary data that suggests that there is a correlation between the depth to the limiting layer in the soil profile and yield potential. And in fact, I just spent 2 hours with her this morning kind of rehashing this, figuring out, all right, what exactly do we have here?
Yeah.
That we've got varying cropping system. This farmer, it was one of Jason's farmers from out where he's from, and that he had yield maps from several years of rotations. And Jason just looked at the maps and arbitrarily assigned these different zones, and then they went out and took some cores and did this research. But as we start to unpack this, and I come in with fresh eyes and start asking questions about some of this, we realize there's this whole cropping system layer that the farmer had recognized variations in this field, and he'd been cropping them differently. But until we put it all out on a spreadsheet, it wasn't obvious that this is exactly what's going on here. So we've got soil cores varying, we've got yield varying, we've got cropping system varying, we've got surface soil health parameter variation, and I think when we put it all together, we're going to get a much better understanding of the drivers that are really affecting performance in these areas. And so that's one of the concepts that we're looking at out at this project out at Carl Blackwell, is we've got an 8.5 acre experiment out there. We've got 24 quarter acre blocks out there that are looking at varying rotations with double crops. They're either going to wheat, bean, sorghum, or corn, and then rotated with a full season sorghum. And then half those blocks are going to get tilled in the fall after the wheat harvest.
Right.
Or before the wheat, where they're going to till in the fall before the wheat.
Yeah.
And then half will remain no-till.
Right.
And then within that, we also have P and K applied at different timings during the season, either in the fall with the wheat, in the winter. We'll put the P and K for the wheat in the fall, and then the P and K for the double crop either in the winter, in the spring when we top dress the wheat, or in the summer just prior to planting. Because Brian's got some preliminary data from one of his grad students that suggests that we may need to think about how that double crop is accessing the nutrients that are available to it, especially in the sufficiency concept, when we're basically just feeding the crop every year.
Right.
If we put it all out there, that wheat, how much is that wheat taking up? Particularly in the case of K, when it's luxurious consumption is in play here. Are we taking up all the K that's supposed to be there for the beans? And Brian's got just as much data that shows that, maybe using the full season calibration curves for the double crop P and K is not what we need to be doing either.
Exactly.
Because we haven't traditionally been a big double crop system.
Right.
And now, with a lot of the work that Josh has done, we see these acres really growing. A lot of it is opportunistic, as he mentioned earlier, based on, wheat harvest rain, soil moisture. But thinking about this in terms of a system that we want to know how to manage, we've got to understand, when do we put those double crop nutrients out. What's happening cycling-wise with this? What's the spatial variation in this? What are these drivers? And so we put this big experiment out there, where we're going to look at seasonal variation in PK availability, uptake, utilization by the primary crop and the double crop, how that rotation looks, what the tillage factor is going to have to do with, again, the nutrient stratification, because Brian, again, you see, I built my whole program on Brian. I know Brian's coattails. Everything he's done that I think is cool over the past 10 years is in this design. So really, I don't have any original ideas there. I'm just saying, what can I do off of Brian's really cool work to kind of make my own project,
Well, I mean, we could start a podcast on that if you want. We'll talk afterwards, but yeah. So, Josh, what has that? What does that mean for some of the cycles that you're working in the cropping systems?
Cycles?
Well, I mean, like your cycle of when you plant and kind of your approach to your research in those.
Well, I mean, we worked, or we talked a lot. We didn't really work. We talked a lot with Steve whenever he was kind of setting this up to kind of get some realm of common rotations that would be in there that we could see and we could kind of adapt around the state. I mean, it's one of those things that we kind of have to pick a crop and kind of go with it. So, yeah, I mean, sorghum isn't grown everywhere, but sorghum's a great indicator. There's corn. So if we go to the east side of the state, it's, maybe not 100% one-to-one, but we can probably take a lot of information from it and adapt it into a wheat double crop bean corn system that they would run over there. And, maybe not 100% for the panhandle that maybe wouldn't double crop, but we could still learn a lot. And so I think it's a big undertaking, and I applaud somebody with. He said that he doesn't have any original ideas, but it takes some gusto for somebody to decide we're gonna do an 8.5 acre research experiment, because it's a big undertaking, and it's going to have a lot of information that is going to be able to be piled on top and maybe elaborated on in the future on these little independent areas of the state that we could kind of go into. So
this project's going to be a lot like the long terms. Is Steve's going to be able to pull. We're all going to be able to pull stuff from this for our entire career, and just the different ways to look at stuff. Because I guarantee us, looking back 5 years from now at what's established, when we're like, man, there's a whole another train of thought that could easily come from this, and it's built in such a way that it's got a lot of flex, a lot of opportunity within it, and Steve's done a great job of kind of building something that isn't going to be so pigeonholed that once the date is done, it's done. That this is going to have a lot of really cool long-term.
I do want to put on the record that some of this did come from a conversation that me and Brian had in my interview. Whenever I interviewed for this position, Brian took me back to the airport. Yeah. And at that point in time, me and Dr. Haggard were doing a P&K management of double crop beans at these different times. And I threw it to Brian, and he said, "It's a dumb idea." In not so many words.
No, if he was there, I would have been nicer than that.
No, she wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
And then when I got here and we talked through it, he's like, "Okay, so maybe not exactly the way you're doing it, but we're going to do something close to it." So this was a trial that was adapted from Louisiana when we were doing it. And then he talked to some folks around here, and I think it's been a great bit of information, because the interesting thing to see is the same thing that he's seen is the same thing we saw in Louisiana.
Really?
The same thing we saw in Louisiana.
Well, I mean, even the cool stuff about the things we didn't expect to see, we see. So the value of a top dress phosphorus in wheat, not expecting a February-March application of phosphorus in wheat to benefit the wheat crop, and yet in the right environments, specifically low P, low pH combination, phenomenal response to phosphorus applied in February and March, when we've been taught for, I don't know, my entire life is that you better be down pre-plant to get that phosphorus in because it's immobile, and yet, it just kind of spin off data that really leads to stuff.
I think that's been some of the most fun because when we looked at it, we were only focused on the soybeans.
Right.
We didn't care about the wheat, right? Yeah. The wheat was bulk harvested, and the fun thing about it is who was your Vaughn's Masters?
Vaughn
right?
was a strip. Hunter was
that looked at P in season and P and K in season wheat that you could or soybean that you could actually see a benefit from an in season application, and then you're re-seeing it on this management of P and K in season at top dress on wheat, and I think it's really fun. Of that, and whether it is because going back to what Steve was saying, because of luxury consumption early, or whether it's we're timing its need now, or it's really fun. And again, breaking it apart and tearing it piece by piece. I mean, the growers just want that recommendation,
right.
But for us, being able to tear it apart piece by piece is where we can adapt it in so many different circumstances and crop rotations and stuff like that. And I think it's good because this is kind of a stream of ideas that doesn't get to be seen this quickly throughout time. And I think it's been really fun for Brian to take it from these strip demos to a research plot to Phillips taking it to a larger scale, again, a demo, but with a different mindset to where we can tease this information out.
That's why it's critical to have Steve here, is because there's a lot of stuff I can do and Josh can do that are extension based, and we've got to move on, right? We can't dig. We got to get 2 years, 3 years, and then move. But there's a lot of these things that we've seen that we got to have somebody like Steve on campus that has the opportunity as a researcher just to beat the Jesus out of and figure out the mechanisms of it and really drive further. And so that's what the land grant's about, is having that combination of research and extension.
And again, I will say with the mental capacity to do it too, because I don't know if this side of the table has the mental capacity to do what he's going to be able to do.
Or the guts,
yeah. So you mentioned Lake Carl Blackwell. Is this being replicated at other sites across the state, or is this just that plot over here just west of town?
Yeah, no, because it's only at the lake. As Josh mentioned, the system will vary. If we go to the Panhandle, or we go over to Bixby, or up to Miami, or down to Altus, it's going to be a different system. So what we're doing now is we're really just focused on this double crop system.
Right.
If we want to look at, Brian's got some interesting stuff happening with the corn cotton rotation out in the Panhandle that it's on the wish list of things to get into. You can't. I learned my lesson when I went to Virginia Tech not to try to do everything that excites me when I first get to the job.
Right.
So I'm having to prioritize a little bit here, but there's more interesting things to get into than we have the capacity to address. So for now, we're focused here in this area on primarily the double crop, P and K on the double crop system.
Well, and kind of like what Josh was saying, the information, the data that you're bringing in can be teased out and maybe extrapolated into other systems.
Yeah, because what we're chasing, Dave, are the drivers that affect the responsiveness. We get a handle on that, then we know where to start out in the Panhandle.
Right.
We know where to start over in eastern Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Because that should be independent of the cropping system.
Right.
That should be affected. There should be certain characteristics of these sites that affect nutrient behavior and utilization by the crops. And so that then we'll take to a new cropping system, test that. So that's kind of what Brian was mentioning, the long-term nature of this is it's a living lab for us.
Oh, yeah.
That with the way we've set it up is we can change these treatment structures in 5-6 years. We can run through 6 years of rotation and then do something else.
Right.
Switch it to corn. Look at, now what's the difference between the double crop sorghum and the full season sorghum?
Right.
Or let's split these blocks and do half of them in sorghum, half of them in corn, then look at the comparison. Beans as well. Let's look at that. So the way it's set up physically in the field gives us a lot of flexibility going forward.
Well, and it's great that you say 6 years, because many times, whenever you're building a system, it's in a rotation of maybe 3 years or maybe 5 years or something like that. So in a 6-year system, hopefully you can go through it twice and kind of, glean more data from it.
Well, statistically that works. We have it set up where every phase of the rotation is present every year.
Right.
And so we've got wheat and we've got beans and then we've got full season. Then we'll have it all again next year. But on that block, it will take 6 years to go through 2 full rotations, or 4 years, I guess. So
very interesting.
Three crops in 2 years, run through that 2 or 3 times. Then we really have a nice, robust data set to draw some conclusions from.
Can I make a left turn? Because when I asked Brian to have Phillips on here, I mean, Phillips is great to talk about fertility, but he's just an interesting guy because of all the things he's been able to do in his career.
Right.
So I asked the question, how, coming back to Oklahoma, so you knew Oklahoma before, you went away. So how has your international work kind of helped you when you came back to kind of either conceptualize these big research projects, because that's kind of what you're seeming to look at is the big picture. We're not thinking, Bill Ron had the big picture, but he had the book to where it had like 22 different projects to get to that big picture. Seems like you're going big picture and then kind of filing it down. So how has like the international work been able to bring your benefit here back to Oklahoma, because your time in Africa and all that is just so interesting, all the stuff you've been able to do over there?
I guess it probably affected, as much as anything, the intentionality of thinking about the system as a whole. Because working over there, with these smallholder growers, any practice that we attempt to modify, we have to consider the ripple effect through their entire livelihood, not just the farm. I mean, we need to spend a little more money on fertilizer. Well, that money's got to come from somewhere. It's a cash-based society in most cases. There's no credit sources, so they don't have they don't use markets like we do. The cash flow is an issue, and so you have to think how to improve these systems, looking at it as a holistic way of life, really, more than anything. I mean, this guy's got to pay for school, he's got to buy clothes, he's got to buy medicine, he's growing his own food. Has he got anything else to sell? Is he consuming 100% of what he produces? So it's just a different way to think about it. I mean, I got over there, and it wasn't very long before we realized we can't ever develop a project without having a socioeconomist on the team. We need agronomic science, we need data science, and we need social science. I mean, these are, we talk about the pillars of land grant, research, extension, teaching. Over there, it's social, data, and agronomy. So we have to understand how these farmers want to receive information. We work a lot more from the ground up rather than as experts. We identify production issues and we understand the things we can evaluate to improve that, but it won't stick over there. I've had experiences where, before I joined APNI, when I was just working in Africa with my IPNI job, you go in there, in the typical way we do. We go in, we assess the production, make some recommendations, they make some changes, yield goes up considerably. They do it again the next year, and then by the third year, they're back to doing it their way. It doesn't stick. What sticks is when it's a more farmer-centric process, when you just begin to talk to the farmer as part of this. Well, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Well, what would you do different? What are you curious about? And then they begin to ask the questions, and you really create. There's a difference between on-farm experimentation and on-farm research. We do a lot of on-farm research in the U.S., but what we really begun to promote globally is on-farm experimentation, where the farmer's the researcher. We're just along to walk them through the process, to help a little bit with the evaluation of the results, what's actually happening here. And so I've brought some of that mentality, because I always would say, well, I've always done on-farm experimentation. I would never start a new project without talking to the farmers first. Mm-hmm. Just like we're doing with this livestock thing. We're talking to people before we do it. And, you just kind of bring that experience into that. But, the big difference is I don't have to bribe so many people to get work done here in the U.S.
So many.
They still do, but just not as many.
You don't have to carry a case of cash around with you to meet with the village elders and the chief.
That's amazing. I mean, just what you're, I assume, joking about right there is just it's a totally different way of dealing with the culture. I mean, just the whole thing of, well, if I want to research and help these folks, I need to bring something to the table that they can benefit from immediately, so that way I can help them benefit agronomically, long term.
It's a whole trust issue.
Yeah.
Why is this person here?
Right.
Why, what are they getting out of this?
Exactly.
There must be something I'm missing here.
Exactly.
Somehow I'm being taken advantage. They couldn't possibly really care whether I improve my production or not.
Right.
And so that's a big part of the process, that you've got to understand that these relationships have to be built, and this trust has to be established. And and in some cultures there's a hierarchy of communication, even that you can't just go talk to this person.
Right.
You've got to, your boss has to talk to their boss, and then they talk, and then eventually you get down to the people who are actually doing the project together. But it's a whole different process.
Yeah, Steve has a project, the Nutcat, that was going on that had trials in how many countries?
Ended up with 6. We started in 9, and for various political and otherwise reasons, it ended up with six different countries. Working on almost 300 farmer fields. Again, had a social component where we would have grower meetings and put together. In fact, I actually got this idea from Brett Carver's wheat improvement team. Mm-hmm. I had been over here visiting Brian, and Brian is on the wheat improvement team, and we got to talking. I thought, now that's a great idea. So I went back and I pitched it, to our leadership there at APNI, that we ought to start building these. We just called them serial improvement teams in these different countries, and that actually was a concept that was adopted. I mean, we would pay for them to meet once a year, and then one of us, regionally would sit in on it. But that has continued. We've got wheat and maize improvement teams still meeting, 5 years later.
Yeah.
Based on this concept of the wheat improvement team here at Oklahoma State University, that now we've got a maize improvement team in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, and then they still meet sometimes twice a year. The team in Ghana meets twice a year.
That is
and
so
they just talk about what growers are doing, what new literature. I mean, they're beginning to follow literature, and that's a big part of what we needed to do in Africa is connect them, because there's a lot of really talented scientists over there that just are disconnected.
Yeah.
Their work never leaves their university, and so we worked at APNI to begin to develop an infrastructure that would allow these guys to be recognized for the work they're doing, meet people, attend some international conferences. And now one of the issues was education in the universities, particularly in the case of precision nutrient management, precision ag, technology, that type of stuff. And they just got, I don't remember what it was. It was probably, I think, a 1.6 million euro grant from the European Union. It was funded, headquartered in Benin. Mm-hmm. And so Benin, Ghana, and I think Rwanda might be in that. There's one other country in East Africa, I think, that's part of that project. But get these guys connected, and then before you know it, now there's money flowing into Africa to do this work. And
so what was the limiting factor in that? The fact that they didn't know that they should share their information, or it wasn't valued, or
it's just where they published the work. The inability to attend these conferences.
Okay.
I mean, we think we're strapped as university
Right.
researchers and extension specialists. These guys have zero money.
Right.
And so, they're all operating in these silos, and we just go and we used our position on the continent to create these networks, to put on these regional activities and build these teams. And now they're beginning to become a little more self-sustaining. They're talking. They know who each other are. I mean, there was a lot of guys with one of the first programs we put together. We called it the West African Forum on Precision Ag, and we invited researchers. It was just word of mouth, people that I had known, searching the literature of these obscure African journals,
Right.
and invited them all to an event. Now they all know each other.
Yeah.
And so they continue to work together. They write grants together. And so that was a nice accomplishment that we had while we were there. It was not anything we did, but just connecting people who were already doing good work and just needed a community to leverage more support for what they're doing.
And that seems so distant from the improvement of the systems at the grower level, but just being able to connect them and that flow of ideas will so significantly help the growers on, kind of down at the bottom level, because just allowing them to get new ideas, or maybe not spend 2 years working on something that somebody one country over had already done. And like you said, maybe it still needs to be adapted, but we know a starting point now instead of having to start from scratch.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was real happy with APNI, with our philosophy, was that we wanted to look at thematic areas continentally. We didn't want to just lock in on cocoa production in Ghana. We want to look at, all right, cocoa production. Where all do we have cocoa on the continent? All right, let's get those people connected. Let's get some projects going. Cocoa was one. Of course, the cereals, that project that Brian mentioned. Oil palm is another one that we've looked at regionally over there. Olives across North Africa. I liked that we were doing.
It was so interesting because Steve came and taught in my and Brian's class last year, and he talked about the geopolitical and the socio-political impact that we look at some of those East African countries, and probably all of Africa, and what they grow or what their main export is and all that. And it's like, oh, well, that just must be what's common over there. But you were talking how impactful the political aspect is to, hey, we can grow a lot of cassava, which will feed a lot of African, but cocoa's the better export, and so we're going to grow cocoa.
Sure. Yeah, in fact, most of those are smallholder farms.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's a funny story about coffee in Africa. All the coffee we have here, it's Kenyan coffee. Yeah. A lot of that coffee is actually grown in Uganda. But Kenya's got the export business, so they buy all the coffee from Uganda. In fact, we have one of APNI's coffee projects in Uganda, but it's probably in Starbucks being called Kenyan coffee because that's where it came from.
And if you go to Kenya, you can't find good coffee.
Well, it's the same way in Brazil.
Because it's all being exported.
It's all
Colombia.
I was so excited my first trip to Kenya. I was like, I'm going to get some amazing coffee. Nescafe Instant was all I could find anywhere. It was disastrous.
Yeah, they don't keep the good stuff.
Don't keep the good stuff.
Well, thank you so much for going on with us, Dr. Phillips. This has been amazing. You're changing the world, and you're bringing your focus to Oklahoma. How was that? Was that pretty mountainous?
Yeah, I don't know if that's an accurate assessment of what's happening here, Dave.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for going on with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next conversation, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag. We'd like to thank Oklahoma State's Dr. Steve Phillips for joining us on the podcast today. And if you get a chance, head over to our website where you can find out more information about our guests and any of the resources that we talked about on the podcast today. Visit the redesigned reddirtagronomy.com. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Ernell, I am Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media, LLC, 2024. And yes, all rights are reserved.